Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today I have for you a review of the HiFiMan HE-R10d, or the dynamic driver version of their HE-R10 closed back series. This is a $1,300 US around the ear, full size, again, dynamic driver headphone closed back, okay? This borrowed the design from the old Sony MDR-R10, I believe, which was, if I remember correctly, the first dynamic driver headphones, I think back in the late 80s, to introduce biocellulose driver technology. And so HiFiMan has taken that basic cup design because the patents and all of that lapsed on it, and they have adapted their own dynamic driver to it and put it in here. So, quick disclaimer, HiFiMan sent this to me for review. They have asked nothing in exchange other than a fair and honest evaluation, so that is what they are going to get. And with that, we will do some shameless self-promotion, and we'll come back on the other side and we will dive into the review. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. All right, so the HE-R10d, again, as I said, it's a $1,300 US dynamic driver. And again, let's talk about that, like the build and the features and all of that, because just right away, the design you see is kind of, I mean, it's unique. We have this new style single band HiFiMan headband here going on. That's okay. It's got the I think these are the tranquility pads, they call them right here, which are a hybrid material of like alcantara, or let's not, I don't think it's suede, but some type of cloth fabric-y thing here with like a pleather on the outside. Maybe that's real leather, not real sure, okay? But we've got to talk about the elephants in the headphones here, and that would be, okay, these cups. Now, this is wood, okay? I was on HiFiMan's website and trying to figure out what kind of wood it was. It doesn't say, but it is wood. They just say wood. That is CNC machined to get this shape. And about that shape, it is odd, right? It's shaped this way to increase the internal volume so that the acoustic energy that gets in there from the driver, like, you know, one, has more space to dissipate and exist, because, like, I mean, you, with a closed back headphone, you are essentially building a very large speaker in a very small room, so to speak. And so the bigger you can make that room, the more you can balance that equation in the favor of good sound, usually. Then, this odd shape right here is, like, it's to create, or it's to make sure that we don't have, to the extent possible, parallel surfaces on the inside, because with reflections of sound waves and all of that, parallel surfaces can lead to standing waves and all of that, where if you make things not parallel, they reflect at different angles, and so they don't interfere, the waves don't interfere with each other quite as much as they can with parallel surfaces or reflections off of parallel surfaces. So they look funky, they really do. But there is a method to that madness in terms of the shape. It just, again, it looks really odd on your head. It just looks really odd, period. Okay, if we're honest about that. So, but that's what it's there. That's why it's there. That's what it does. So it is a form follows function kind of a thing at its core. All right. Now, other build and design elements here. This is compatible with HiFiMan's Blue Mini dongle, which I forgot to bring over here. Give me 1 second. I will get that. Here we go. Is compatible with HiFiMan's Blue Mini R2R Bluetooth dongle, which I have a review of just this piece up because I have a few of these now, since HiFiMan has also sent me their HE-R9 and their Deva Pro in the past. And they both work with this, but I mean, we have this 3.5 millimeter TRRS input on the left cup, where this just slides right in there like so. And now you can connect this via Bluetooth, LDAC, aptX HD, like several of the higher quality Bluetooth codecs to your smartphone or to a DAP or whatever, and do music wirelessly and all of that. So that is here, that is included with the package. Again, I have a review of the Blue Mini dongle up, which I will link to in the description below. Now, as far as the fit goes, if you remember my review of the HE-R9, which I have right here, which is the younger sibling, maybe not younger, but it's the little sibling of this one, where we have these plastic cups instead of the wood here, but otherwise the shape and all of that is the same. I said that the HE-R9 does not stay on the head very well, and like it's wiggling around on me as I move my head around, and it just doesn't feel as secure and is in place because the clamp is not very hard. The R10D clamps only slightly harder, okay? Only slightly, but it's just enough. It's just enough that it stays on my head a little bit better than the HE-R9 does. So that's an ergonomic upgrade from the cheaper model right there. All right, drivability, 32 ohm, 103 decibels, so they are easy to drive. I powered these off of a variety of mobile devices, not just the R2R, the Blue Mini R2R dongle, but my Canon N6 Mark II DAP. I used briefly the new HiFi, that company that's spelled H-I-B-Y. Okay, the RS6 just came in for review, and I tried that very briefly on here to see how that would do. It's fine. So this is a very easy to drive headphone, can be powered by most mobile devices. It also has a mass of 337 grams, so it's not particularly heavy. I didn't have any extended use comfort issues with that. Let's talk about the wiring again, because even though we have the 3.5 millimeter TRRS on the left cup, we also have a 3.5 millimeter input on the right cup as well. And so you can use more standard headphone cables with these, with the catch. The same catch that applies to the HE-R9 and to the Deva Pro applies to the R10D with cabling, in that you have to have the cables wired up a certain way or you're going to short out the right side because of the TRRS connection being compatible with the Blue Mini R2R dongle. Okay, so you do need to get you do need to use the right cables if you're going to use this as a wired connection. Now, in the package, HiFiMan includes a 3.5 millimeter single-ended cable to a dual 3.5 millimeter TRS cable on the headphone end here, which is, this is probably about 4 feet, just a little over a meter long. Okay. But this is going to be wired up differently, where the rings here on the TRS connector are not wired to anything. Okay, so they are a little bit different in that way than most standard aftermarket dual 3.5 millimeter cables. So I have a video about that too, and HiFiMan's wiring scheme, which I will link to down below. So you have to be careful about the cables that you get. But this is one of the stock cables that came with it. You can see it is just a little bit stiff. It keeps wanting to uncoil on me when I do that, but it's not in their plastic tubing, like medical tubing that they've used with other things. They also send in a longer 4-pin XLR to dual 3.5 millimeter cable, and a similar length 1/4 inch single-ended to dual 3.5 millimeter cable in the box as well. Speaking of the box, the packaging on this one is like their more expensive planars. You get this fancy vinyl box, okay, that it comes with in here. So like they have been sending in this basically a cheap shoebox with some of their more recent models, but because this one is an over $1,000 unit, at least that's most likely why, you get it in one of these nice vinyl boxes. Okay. Is there anything else that I need to mention from a ergonomics and use standpoint? I don't think so. I think that covers most of the bases. So let's get into the sound, and then I'll spend some time with comparisons on this. So other than the Blue Mini dongle and those two DAPs that I just mentioned to power this, I also spent some time driving it off of HiFiMan's own EF400 DAC amp. And I also used my combination of Shit Bifrost 2/64 DAC and Lake People G111 Mark I amplifier to power these two. And I got a heart cable that is compatible with this. I forget what the model number on that heart cable is. I will put a link to it down in the description below, though, to use for most of the power of driving it here. Now, from a performance standpoint, one of the first things that I noticed, and this is similar to the HE-R9 in this regard, is that for a closed back, it is not all that isolating. Okay, sound still comes in from the outside world relatively easy, and sound leaks out relatively easily as well. Now, some of that might be, I don't know how well this, it probably won't show up well on the camera, but if I hold this up to my studio lights in the room here, I can see light filtering through between where this plastic part here meets the wooden part of the cup. Like in here, build-wise, there's just a slight bit of gap in there, so these are not completely sealed off. Okay, and so that's where a lot of that leakage comes from. So if you are wanting a well-isolating closed back to use in an office setting or to wear on a bus or anything like that, you A, probably want something more isolating, and B, might have to lack some self-respect, because again, these just look really silly on the head. That's my opinion and the opinion of many others, but that's just a fact, I think. Well, as much as of a fact as an opinion can be, that is. Okay, so there is that reality to keep in mind. All right, sound signature. It again emphasizes mid-bass and mid-range just a little bit, much like the HE-R9 does. However, it does not emphasize the mid-range to the extent that the R9 does. So there is a little bit of a hump in the frequency response around 1 kilohertz with the R10d, but is not as high as the R9. So there still is a little bit of vocal forwardness, a little bit of like acoustic guitar and piano and brass instrument kind of forwardness to it, okay, but not to the extent of this one, and usually not to the extent where it tripped up my shoutiness sensitivity. Every once in a while it would, just not near to the extent that the R9 does or that the Sundara closed does, okay? So there it is, but lots of mid-bass, okay, lots of very active, hard-hitting mid-bass. Okay, there are a couple of frequency peaks, again, one in the mids around 1 kilohertz that isn't terrible, but it's just there enough to notice it and throw off the timbre just a little bit. Okay, but then there's also one in the consonant range of the treble, so you do get some sharp S's and some sibilance going on in the treble response as well. Now, it's not super forward up top there, so even though you get the s kind of sound on S's, they aren't particularly sharp or painful or anything like that. You hear them, you notice that they are there, but they are not overly aggressive. Okay, so that's how I hear it anyway. So even if they may still work for treble sensitive individuals, just know that that sound is there slightly. All right. Now, and I mentioned the physicality there, the bass in particular, the mid-bass anyway, it hits hard. Like, it's a fun, active, hard-hitting presentation in there, in the mid-bass. You do get some roll-off in the sub-bass starting around, 50, 60 hertz, which is pretty common for dynamic drivers unless there's a hefty amount of tuning going on. But these don't really dig super deep into the sub-bass. Not terrible, but it's not, not class-leading extension on the low end there. All right, the soundstage, the classic, it's big for a closed back, right? It's not going to be huge. It's not enormous like the egg-shaped HiFiMans that are out there, the open backs anyway. Okay, but it's got some size to it. It does an okay job with positional effects, the imaging and the separation and all of that. Mostly laterally, not great in the depth, okay? But it's there. The resolution is, again, it's okay. It does a really good job, actually, surprisingly so, from the Bluetooth connection from the Blue Mini dongle, of resolving the plucks of bass strings and that sort of thing. Now, I don't know if that's because of raw resolution or if it's because the mid-bass frequency range is elevated a bit where it just makes them more noticeable. In fact, that's probably it. But it is enjoyable to listen to a good bassist, bass guitarist particularly, play their instrument through these, because you notice a lot more of like the sounds of fingers on strings and like the kind of work that they're doing there. So from a resolution standpoint, I did enjoy that. Okay, and so then the timbre it's okay. It's not horrible. There's a little bit of mid-range forwardness, and then there's that elevated mid-bass, which can at times get slightly bloated and just a little bit too thick sounding. Not horribly so, not all the time. Some music it does, some it doesn't. It's just a thing that is there, and all of that. So the sonic package of this on its own it's okay. It's not terrible. It's not really amazing in any one thing, but it's an overall enjoyable listen for the most part, most of the time, I think. Especially for if you're into EDM, hip-hop, dubstep, that kind of music where you get a lot of mid-bass and you have a lot of that mid-bass energy, that thump and all of that going on. Like, these are good for that. Okay, very enjoyable there. I think the issue with this headphone comes in when you remember that it does not exist in a vacuum. There is a market context around it. Now, in my opinion, it is the best tuned of the HiFiMan closed backs that I have heard. Okay, the Sundara closed, the HE-R9. It is not as problematically mid-forward as these two are. They are all fairly mid-bassy with a fair amount of mid-bass in there, and they have that fun macrodynamic impact in that mid-bass too. So they all have that, but I think this one has the best tuning, and it is also more resolving than the other two. You get better resolution, better spatial performance, like that sort of thing from the R10d. And you should, because it's the most expensive of those three. I did some comparisons of the R10d with my Foztex TH900 with the Lawton Purple Heart chambers on them. So this would be a closed back that by the time you buy a brand new Foztex TH900 and then you put Lawton chambers on it, you're probably getting closer to $2,000. This one, like, it has more bass resolution, more resolution generally. It is more V-shaped. There's more treble energy in here than in here. You get a little bit wider soundstage, because that's a trademark of the Lawton chambers, is they really widen out the soundstage. So that is in here too. But you have a more technically proficient presentation overall here, and also better bass extension. Like, this one kind of breaks the mold and bucks the trend of dynamics, like rolling off in the sub bass. This just keeps digging deeper and deeper and deeper, okay, over that. Now, this is still going to be too V-shaped for some, too much treble energy. It's too much treble energy for me at times, and I think the mid timbre on this might actually be just a slight bit stronger than the TH900 with the Lawton chambers, even though I think the TH900 with the Lawton is the overall higher performing unit with most music, all things considered. All right, the other comparison here is the Focal Radiance, which again is another dynamic driver, closed back, easy to drive. Coming in, I think it's $1,290, so basically the same price, $1,300 for each of these here. And this is where things get really tough for the R10d, I think, because as far as just being a closed back headphone here and doing closed back headphone things, similarly easy to drive. That's basically a wash. I maybe needed one or two notches of extra volume for the Radiance over the R10d from the DAPs that I was using and that sort of thing. Okay, but still easy to drive. But the Radiance, like Focal closebacks, does a much better job of isolating you sonically from the surrounding environment and holding sound in. Okay, so one of the key advantages and one of the reasons we go closed back is to close off the outside and hold in the inside, right? And the Radiance does a far superior job of that than the R10d does. The Radiance also, in my humble yet correct opinion, looks much less ridiculous on the head and is far less embarrassing to walk around with in public. Okay? So there is that as well. But then, of course, the thing is, with the Radiance is it also sounds better. It just across the board. It doesn't completely hammer the performance of the R10d in any one technicality. Like, it's only slightly more resolving. It's only slightly sharper in its imaging and its separation, and it's, you know, got more depth to the soundstage and that sort of thing. Its tuning is a little bit more natural through the mid-range and the treble. Like, voices sound a little bit more like voices. Cymbals sound a little bit more like cymbals. That sort of thing on the Radiance than they do the R10d. And then there's also a bass shelf here. Maybe it doesn't hit quite as hard through the mid-bass as the R10d does, but there's still a fair amount of physicality going on here and a little bit better deep bass extension going on with the Radiance. So, wrapping it up then, the conclusion about the R10d is you have the best of HiFiMan's like non-top of the line closed backs right now here in the R10d, which we should have. It is reasonably solid in its sonic performance. It doesn't really jump out and grab you. It's safe maybe in that mid-bass physicality. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's also far from poor. Okay, it's pretty solid. It is a little bit better about staying on the head in this design than the HE-R9 is, but it's not great at that either. So it's just, it's okay. That's kind of the thing here. It's like at $1,300, there is just a much better all-around option that exists out there. And like the Radiance here, is the Focal is producing another run of these. Like, this is going to be available again in the near future. I think they're taking pre-orders for it. And to me, the biggest problem with the R10d is the fact that the Radiance exists. Okay, that's its biggest thing. I think since HiFiMan has been slashing their prices a lot lately, that this one makes a lot more sense at $800 or $900 than at $1,300 where this one sits. I think they need to do a permanent price cut on this one. Because again, it's not poor, it's not bad, it's enjoyable for like hip hop and EDM and that sort of thing if that's what you're into. It just doesn't quite stack up at the price with the Radiance or the Lawton that I just put down there, the TH900 Lawton that I just put down there. Okay. So I'll go ahead and leave it there. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the HiFiMan HE-R10 dynamic version. Please again, like, subscribe, check out my Patreon, check out my PayPal, and as always, enjoy the music.